Hi. Hi, I'm Jeremy Ruston, the inventor of TiddlyWiki, and welcome to the 51st TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm joined today by Mario. Would you like to say hi, Mario, and where you're from and your connection to TiddlyWiki?
Hi folks, my name is Mario Pitsch. I'm from Austria, near Salzburg, contributed to TiddlyWiki Classic and to TiddlyWiki 5.
Good to have you here, Mario. Thank you. And Nathan, how are you?
I'm good. I'm Nathan Kane. I'm a developer from the United States, working with TiddlyWiki for 6 to 8 months or so now.
Indeed, and contributing a lot. Great to have you here, Nathan. And finally, Stephan, how are you?
Hi, I'm Stephan from Germany, also contributor to TiddlyWiki, and I think I will start again soon. Now the new version.
Indeed. Stephan's been blocked by the slow progress of 5.013. So today we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A feature. So I think if you're watching this on YouTube, you need to click on this little kind of ribbon guy that appears on the top of the window in order to see the questions. I'll select the first one. So the first question is, actually they've come up in a different order than I expected. First question is from Nathan, and is how could we extend the batch build syntax to support interpreting arbitrary environment variables? And he notes that the obvious choice of putting $ and then the name of an environment variable might not be the best approach. So let me screen share just to show the context of this question, and then we'll talk through. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. So let's find an example of a tiddlywiki.info file. This is the one for tw5.com. And so these build targets were introduced, I think, in 5.012. What they basically are is command line input to TiddlyWiki transmogrified into a JSON file. So there's some weirdnesses that you need to do JSON style encoding instead of the ordinary command line encoding that you have to do for things like spaces. Nathan's question is whether we can make it so that these command tokens are parameterized with environment variables. So the approach that Nathan's explicitly rejecting is this very conventional one, where each time we pick out a command token, we do a search and replace for $ and then a symbol name, and then look up the associated environment variable and use it to replace the value. So that doesn't seem great. The approach that seems obvious is to extend the syntax so that individual command tokens can be, instead of being a string, can be an object, and that gives us a way to pass other parameters. So we could, for instance, just make, we did that. That would maybe be the simplest thing I could think of, and that would allow us to use an unmodified environment variable in place of a single command token.
Isn't this already JSON syntax? And isn't there some proposal? I think I saw something for JSON syntax to refer to other stuff.
Would that be the link format?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe we can use that.
I think if that's the X, is it XDI that I mean? Sorry, you're still hopefully seeing my screen. Because this has a JSON serialization format that includes. I'm terrible at parsing this kind of stuff, and I think, yeah, that's too complicated for me.
Yeah, that seems a bit broader context and probably overkill.
I think it's also it's about linking, whereas really this is about transclusion, isn't it? It's
well, one thing that kind of occurs to me looking at your sort of example proposal here, if we use like an embedded object as sort of the replacement token like that, if we used the key of that object as the environment variable name, and the value as perhaps a default if that environment variable is unset, that might offer some interesting flexibility as well.
Or we could do that with that, couldn't we?
True, true.
Would be less overloading. I mean, one thing parenthetically I find tricky about this is that at the moment it feels like we're designing a format that's designed to be manually typed, because that's how people put together their tiddlywiki.info files. But obviously downstream I want to be able to provide a user interface for manipulating these things. And so that just means that I guess we need to be thinking about automated parsing and automated generation of these things.
And we don't want to start from something that's going to complicate that effort later.
Exactly. But picking up the transclusion thought, in other places in TiddlyWiki 5's design where we need to do something that looks like transclusion, we take some care to reuse the existing transclusion format. I mean, the existing transclusion mechanism. So I don't know. I mean, here I note that we can. In Node.js, we can easily iterate through all of the available environment variables. So a thing that we could do is at startup, well, I suppose at other times, actually, startup would be fine. At startup, to read all the available environment variables into a tiddler with a given prefix. So you might end up then with, let's say, config environment and var. Does that make sense? So that's obviously incomplete because just like the $ syntax, it's overloading the string. But it does seem kind of interesting, doesn't it? Because then you could imagine other things within the server that might want to be able to access values in environment variables or use them for defaults and stuff. So that might be handy. But then we'd presumably we'd have to either, basically it would mean writing these commands as wiki text. And I mean, but if we do it as, so I mean, a way, imagine this. So what this would mean is that there's a kind of implicit default, which is type text equals, yeah? So that's a construction like that is equivalent to one of these ordinary string constants. But then optionally, we say for the scope of a single value, I'm missing a curly brace, for the scope of a single command token, that we say, actually, this command token is in wiki text. And then that allows people to write an arbitrary wiki text expression.
I do kind of like that. Two things. One, Mario rejoined and needs to be unmuted again.
Hi, Mario. Sorry about that.
And he brought up a good point in the chat that exposing all of the environment variables in that way, may constitute an information leakage if the user's not aware that's going to happen. So we'll at least want some either some opt-in on which environment variables to do, or some easy way of restricting that set.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was also referring security. I think would be a problem if you could write to variables, but in this case it's just reading. Yeah,
it would be just reading.
Yeah, it would be just reading. But I was thinking in the first round I was thinking about writing variables.
Yeah, but Mario,
Yeah.
If you write to variable, it's just for following sessions or threads that you start, but not for anything outside of that.
Yes, right. That's right. So in this case, it's just reading. But I was thinking about if a user could write environment variables, then you would have a problem.
That would probably be a mistake.
Yep. No, that wouldn't be a problem. Not at all.
It will. Yeah,
no,
it will.
Because it's not. This change does not live after your script ran.
Right, but
it's only for everything which is started from this process. And that's
unless we did the equivalent of what the export command does in a bash script, where you push the variable out for the. Anyway, I mean, here Mario's Mario's musing is correct. It would be, I think, unsafe to try to write to environment variables. But what do you think about this idea that we whitelist the environment variables that should be exposed, and then that they are exposed by as a tiddler by preceding their name with that prefix? What does that look like? I mean, from a security point of view, that seems quite clean.
Yeah, but I thought the variable, the environment ENVVAR, is just the information for the build parser to read the variable ENVVAR. So it's not set by the tiddler, or?
No, that's correct. It's the name of the tiddler that. So during startup, the boot kernel would look at this thing, and then it would create tiddlers for each of the environment variables that should be imported, and those tiddlers would have that name format.
No. Because if someone names an environment variable password, and TiddlyWiki would expose it, then you have a plain text password. This is
but I'm saying sorry. There's the whitelist here, so only these environment variables are transferred. So if there was one called password, it would only be transferred if it was listed in that array.
Yes, but users tend to use insecure mechanisms, and I wouldn't be happy with this.
But hang on, I don't understand the exposure. What's the exposure that you're worried about? So the user's got private information in environment variables.
You shouldn't even be. It shouldn't be possible to expose private variables.
But hang on, I mean, I don't understand. This is so.
If someone, I do create a GitHub repository with some code in it, and I don't know, most of the users don't understand what is displayed here. So I could expose whatever I want from someone else. They just use my code, say GitHub clone and server start and init, but first init and then start, and then they are exposing their environment variables.
But I mean, no, that's no different than if your wiki included a module that read their environment variables and did something with them. I mean, all that's saying is that there's unsafe wikis.
Anytime they.
Yeah, we can easily make a wiki that's dangerous in lots of ways, can't we?
Yeah.
What do you, I mean, or do you think that would need mitigation?
I don't think that introduces any more risk than any modular add-on to the TiddlyWiki context would or could introduce.
What do you think, Larry?
Right. If you say npm install and you install unsafe, unsecure code, then you have access. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, I think I'll try and write up a ticket after this, but I favour this approach. For the same reasons that I always do, that it's reusing what we've got, and it does seem as though it would give you a fair amount of flexibility there, because this approach here, you couldn't apply a prefix or remove a prefix or anything like that to an environment variable, whereas here, what we would actually do is pass the name of the environment variable in as a variable when we wikify that text, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested, Nathan, you're the one that raised this. What are the kind of use cases that you're interested in?
Mostly deployment related, deploying to different cloud services that pass things like the port or persistent storage path information through environment variables. That's the primary use case, I would think.
I think that makes perfect sense, of course. So that things like, in fact, being able to pass the wiki name would be quite useful as an environment variable, wouldn't it?
Yep.
But that's always on the command line anyway, so you're already safe with that, I guess. Because you can't include that in the build tokens. Okay. So I'll since this is in my copy buffer, I'll write up a ticket afterwards. Now the next question. So now I press select on this one, and this is from Stephan, who's asking, well, let me read the question. Now that we have the environment variables, I think it should be possible to have the content of my tiddlystuff.tiddlyspot.com in a Git repo without this being a fork of TiddlyWiki. What do I need to do? And I think here I've got a good example actually, which is in my GitHub repo that I've got called Talky Talky. So this contains the talk that I gave back in April. So it's published as that tiddlywiki.com Talky Talky. So although it's built to the same place as all of the other bits of TiddlyWiki that come from the TiddlyWiki 5 repo, this is in a separate repo. And if I again bring in, there's a bit of background sweet rustling, I'm not sure.
Well, that was my fault, probably. Sorry.
that was your soldering. So here there's a wiki folder for the actual talk. It includes a bunch of plugins like the highlight plugin, Cecily, Markdown, etc. A bunch of themes and languages, and then the build script just kicks it off with the build command to build everything. So building everything in this case means the main HTML file, the fav icon, and also a static rendering of the site. In order for this to work, all you need is to have this to work, which means having TiddlyWiki installed. So either that means using npm -g install TiddlyWiki. Oh, sorry, the other way around, isn't it? npm install -g TiddlyWiki. Or there's or there's the, what was I trying to say? Anyway, it builds to the output folder here, and then I've got a staging script that just copies it to the right part of that germaline.github.com repo. So I think this is a good template for anytime you're creating a wiki that the contents of which are not going to need to end up as pull requests to tiddlywiki.com.
But I think what Stephan needs is also because you are only including TiddlyWiki plugins, because some of his plugins will be outside, so there will be something like,
oh yes, quite possibly,
Stephan plugin, and he just needs to set the environment variables for the plugins, and if TiddlyWiki doesn't find it, it should look up the environment variable. So,
is that right, Stephan? Just looking to see what plugins are in here at the moment. Yeah, so there's all of the plugins. Yeah.
So in normal case,
mainly for the plugins, but also for some documentation of them.
Yeah, then it's the edition. So you have to have the editions folder set. So this is similar to Jeremy's structure.
Yeah.
And this is the edition, environment variable, and the plugin is just any structure. So I think basically now you are free to create your own structure of your repo, how you like it. So
Yeah. So basically, it's going to be something. I can never remember the syntax for setting a variable. Is it set? TiddlyWiki plugin path. Is that right? I can never remember. But setting that to
somewhere, yeah. No. Yeah,
okay.
but this should be in the bash RC file or somewhere, so outside of your build script, because because if I would clone Stephan's repository, I would need to have the same plugin or the same environment variable. I don't want this, so the setting of the environment variable has to be outside of the repository. Because I can set my own variables in my own environment and not with his build script, because I want to use his build script without the dependency to his variable.
I think it's tricky, that one, because I mean, the way I look at it now is that we've got the actual build command is so short that there's very little in these batch files other than setting these environment variables.
No, this is not possible, because everyone, if I clone Stephan's repository, I would need to change this file. So I cannot send a pull request anymore, because then I would send my dependency to his repository. This is not possible in that way. So this has to be outside in the bash RC or somewhere. So the environment variable needs to be set. You can have a if. If the environment variable is not set, then set it to the default. But if it is set in my environment, then don't touch it. So
yeah, no, I understand. It's for somebody who's reusing a repository like this, that makes a lot of sense if they want to reuse the build script. But for the guy publishing the wiki, it feels like it's also reasonable to set up the build script for maximum convenience in doing the build, because that bash RC is a sort of another level of complexity of being comfortable with the command line. I guess
that's the way how it works. If I say if, check the environment variable. If it is set, use it. If it is not set, use the default, then this is okay. So then the setup of this repository is defined in a way that someone else can work with it. If you set
I understand, but I mean it's tricky, isn't it? Because I mean it does make
you did it. You have your standard Q build or your big build. There is a check for the environment variable, that perfectly works.
Well, no, but what I mean is that it generates complexity for the person setting up the repo, because they have to understand about their bash.rc file or whatever the hell.
If they want a contribution, then yes.
Otherwise, if they don't, the main effect is it's harder for people to send pull requests to them, isn't it?
Yeah, then I will send a pull request that fixes it.
Yes. Yes, that's the answer. Okay, so Stephan, was that a good answer to your question?
I have to test it. I will look at the video later, and then try to do that.
Cool. Well, thanks for the question, Stephan. Thanks for the question, Nathan, as well. There was another topic that I was
I was about to write a new question, but maybe it's faster to ask it directly. We had the question in the group about someone who had some tables generated by an R script.
Yes.
And he wants to have several, or that was at least one idea, to have several tiddlers out of that. And I was wondering whether it's possible to have one file with thousands of tiddlers in it, which we could simply drag and drop to TiddlyWiki to import it. I did it that way, that I had later 200 files, which I dropped all at once, and this worked. But I think it's a bit inconvenient to have to select 200 files to drop them on TiddlyWiki. Maybe it's also possible for a script to generate one tiddlers file with tiddlers in plural, which then can be dropped, or maybe a zip file or something like that. I looked into the code, but I couldn't find something which allowed it.
Good question. Okay, so sorry, go for it.
Now, Jeremy, I think we discussed a structure several times already in the Hangouts before you did create the multi-tids, the multi-tiddler, let's say, single tiddler, single line import mechanism.
So
we had yeah.
So I was going to show that. There's two answers to your question, Stephan. There's the multids file format, so you can make one of these files and drag and drop that. The disadvantage of these files is that it's only one line per tiddler. The only thing, therefore, that you can set for each tiddler is the title as a suffix to the base title that's given at the top of the file and the actual text of the tiddler. So it may be sufficient for some applications, and these files can be dragged and dropped quite happily. The second alternative is to drag a JSON file in.
Yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work.
It should work.
Yeah, maybe I did something wrong with my JSON file, but it was not imported at all.
I know that used to work.
Yeah, so let's try setting one up.
I think the problem here is that getting JSON right is a little bit tricky. So.
Okay, well that may be something. So there is this function. Can't remember what its parameters are. Let's just have a quick look. Title. So there's a really stupidly long tiddler. Let me find something shorter. Tiddlers will do. So this function is giving me a JSON text for a single tiddler. I'm now very carefully copying and pasting it from the DevTools, and it's decided to remove my selection. But I'm carefully leaving off the opening and closing quotes. And now I'm going to create stick that in a file, but I'm going to put it inside an array because it expects the JSON file to be an array of tiddlers.
Ah, that was the problem.
Because that's what allows you to have multiple ones. And then test.json, and then if we open up the empty version here, which doesn't have that tiddler, find the right test.json. So I don't know if you can see, but I think it's trapping on the unexpected token T. What did I do wrong?
Yeah, that's what I also had sometimes.
You've got an extra quote there at the start.
Oh, so I have. Thank you. So that was me saying I'd carefully dragged and dropped, and I failed. Right, we'll try again. Where is it? Test.json. Okay, and now we've got a tiddler called tiddlers that came in. So the trouble with the JSON importer, though, is look what happens if I give it the field Stephan with the value hello. Repeat the experiment. And if we look at the fields, there's no field called Stephan, and the reason for that is a slightly embarrassing one, that the JSON importer explicitly only imports, sorry, I said JSON exporter, I meant to say JSON importer, it only imports those standard fields.
Okay.
The reason for that is because for a long time the only place where I was using the JSON deserializer was in the build process for TiddlyWiki Classic, and in that instance we were getting a JSON file from TiddlyWeb, and that JSON file includes a number of other fields that we don't want. So back in December 2012. This was the kludge that I did to make that work. So what we need now is to relax that restriction and bring in all fields from a JSON file, but we need to provide an additional means for the TW2 build process to weed out those fields that it doesn't want.
Okay.
So in the meantime, being as how you do have a thing that you are building, you should be able to just actually it's quite well. It's not that it's not a simple one-line change, but it's this guy that needs to change. In fact, the quick fix would be to say the no, there's no quick fix. That I think that little bit there. So maybe that's a second ticket that I should open, actually. Or no, I'll leave it to you to open, Stephan, if you find that you need that fix.
Jeremy, you could just whitelist Stephan. Yeah, so it would be a one-time change. So you could whitelist your fields that you want. So with the title and then the split, then it should work, but only for
for these special cases. Yeah. But yes, so it would be good to fix that, and obviously the JSON import is intended to be the primary general purpose interop way of doing import, and there's a surprising number of JSON files that with very little massaging can be imported. Okay.
One thing that kind of occurs to me seeing this and thinking back to the sort of original problem statement, it may be interesting to also be able to drag and drop a wiki's info file and have it walk out and grab all of the tiddler files based on that. I could imagine a use case where you're trying to coordinate multiple large data sets. It might be nice to sort of build out a hierarchy of wikis, with each data set sort of living in its own wiki for collection and management, and then brought into sort of a level up wiki for aggregation and analysis and so forth.
And Nathan, you've seen the include wikis functionality in the tiddlywiki.info, I assume.
Yeah, this would be a little bit different, though. I mean, sort of explicitly moving the data into the wiki as sort of a gated import.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that what's the word? Is an area that we haven't really explored is allowing the user to issue commands or initiate processes through the browser that are then performed on the server. So, being able to import a URI, or I guess a file system location in the browser, and then to have that actually resolved and the importing done back on the server side. So one way I've thought about doing that is via the command mechanism. So making it so that there's a some kind of real-time comms channel that allows command tokens to be passed backwards and forwards. And then, obviously, that would open up for reuse all of the commands that we have. The load command, I guess, in order to do what you want, needs to be extended to import a tiddlywiki.info file. But that's probably okay.
Yeah, that would definitely cover that use case as well, and has some other awesomeness to it just in general. So yeah, definitely.
A good way for users to shoot themselves in the foot, I think.
Well, that's true of any powerful functionality, I think.
I also thought about this because if you don't drag and drop them in the right order, then you may have different results. So I think this is mainly a management problem, not the import problem. So to manage the structure right, I think is if you have 2 or 3 people, then I think it would work. But with 10, it would be really funny.
Yeah.
So you do 10 imports from 10 different peoples, and you get 12 different versions. So.
Cool. So the next thing I was going to suggest talking about. Well, first, does anybody have anything else that they would like to suggest before I do? Okay, so I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we've got a very technical group here. So earlier on today, yes, we had Michael asking if it was possible to change the styling of individual tiddlers based on how they're tagged. And Stephan points out a way to do it by modifying the ViewTemplate. And I can show you that here, actually, where in the Talky Talky wiki, we have a different background color for each slide. And if I switch to a more sensible theme, actually, it's much easier to show you in the repo, forgive me. So let me just open up the source of the thing. So this is the modified ViewTemplate that's in Talky Talky. And if might make sense to just open up alongside it the core one. So this is the core ViewTemplate. So it already has a mechanism for adding classes to the tiddler frame, which are done by these variables, and those variables are set by the tiddler widget. So I fall into the trap, if that's the word, of thinking of the tiddler widget as being the same as the set widget. It just sets the current tiddler variable, but it's worth remembering that it also sets these additional variables based on whether the target tiddler exists, is missing, is a shadow tiddler or a system tiddler. Okay, so that's the very specific mechanism that we use at the moment to have tiddler-specific classes. And those tiddler-specific classes just give us those three things. Yeah. So in Talky Talky, what's added is a variable called frame styles, and you can see it just I was going to say transcludes, but it's confusing. It includes the value of the background color variable, and if you look here, well, actually, let's give ourselves a tiny bit more visibility. So you can see here that we set the background color variable to the value of the background color field. And so back here, if we look at one of these guys, as you would expect, there's the background color field with its hex value in. So that and then it's that variable that then gets picked up here by the frame styles on the div. So the div now sets its class to the output of that macro and its style to the output of that macro. So this is to say what I would like to do better than, because obviously having people replace the ViewTemplate is a real pain, and it means that it's impossible for a plugin to augment functionality in this area, because only one plugin can provide the ViewTemplate.
I also think that this would be a nice mechanism or plugin or whatever, like the with TiddlyWiki Classic, the text template tweaks or something like this.
Yes, exactly. So that's the goal here, is to possibly, based on the mechanism that we've already got, to extend it to allow that kind of logic to be done. Mm-hmm. Now, in fact, setting the background color is particularly easy. So I think there's that's the sort of goal. First goal is to be able to set background color. Second goal would be to be able to do the tag template tweak, where we add a class according to the presence of a tag. Mm-hmm. Selectively. So I've been playing with this.
I found the thread that I opened.
Oh, great!
I posted the URL in the chat.
Let me go there. Right. So the mechanism that Stephan is describing here is one where it is possible to tag a view template with a special tag. That means in this case that the suffix at the end of that tag is used as a tag, and it only applies the view template if that tag is present. So it's a way of expressing very directly the tag template tweak logic. As presented here, it does not allow you, for instance, without some extension, allow you to make an arbitrary expression. So you can't say apply this view template to tiddlers with this tag or this tag or this tag and this tag. So it's a very specific solution to one use case. I think the broader thing is, being able to have more complex logic than this. So the experimentation I've been doing is with it's just before the Hangout started, and it's in this branch. So I don't know if this is a very clear way of doing it. What I've done here, no, let's go into the editor. So I've modified the core. Modified the core view template. What I'm going to do now is give it some breathing space. So I've added a frame styles variable, which is just like what we had in Talky Talky. Here I'm using import variables. So import variables is dragging in all variables in tiddlers that are tagged tags view template macro. So what this does is it means that all tiddlers with that tag will get applied as a local definition. So you'll recall from last time what import variables actually does is stack up all of the set widgets that correspond to the macro definitions that it finds behind that filter, and then it puts its children, in this case just that tiddler widget invocation, right in the middle of all of those set widgets, so that the values of those set widgets are available. Okay, so then I created a test tiddler. So this is a tiddler tagged view template macro, and it defines frame style to be 100 pixels. So that's a that definition. By dropping in this tiddler, that style will be applied to all tiddlers without having had to make a specific modification to the view template. So run this, and sure enough, we see that all the tiddlers are now 20 pixels wide, which wasn't very sensible, was it? 100 pixels wide. And because I'm using box sizing, that's the overall width, including the padding, which is why it looks a bit narrower than 100 pixels. So then the hope was to be able to do this, where we within this frame styles macro definition, we define a new value for that variable by adding a new chunk onto the end. So it's kind of like the way paths are handled, on the command line, where I believe there's a common syntax where you say something like set path equals this, something like that. But unfortunately, this doesn't work, and the Hangout started before I'd had a chance to try. We've got a completely blank story column. which is a tad unexpected. So I'll try and track it down, but I see no reason why this shouldn't work. And it's not enough to achieve either the first goal or the second goal, actually. What it lets us do is unselectively add styles to all tiddlers without having to modify the view template. So it doesn't really buy us quite enough. But the hope is, of course, that we can do let's make up a new widget. Actually, no, let's say right. So hope that makes sense. So this is saying aspiration is to be able to have wikitext logic in here, and then that does give us what? So this should be frame classes because we're doing, yeah, and then we can just say that. So this now adds the CSS class my class to all tiddlers that have the tag my tag, which I think is the second requirement that I mentioned. So getting to do that, we would need to wikify these macros, and at the moment, because these macros are expanded here, that type of expansion does not give you wikification. So I think this is one of those things where, having explored as far as I have, I think it indicates a deeper, more fundamental thing that we need to think about, which is how do we get attribute values that are the result of wikifying wikitext, and we purposefully don't do that by default because it's slow and would also lead to lots of extraneous things being wikified that weren't intended to be wikified.
Mm-hmm. I also think if you use a lot of these list filter things, then you have a huge performance penalty.
Yes, but I'm not so worried about that because I think the great thing about the list, the approach that we've got is that it's as amenable. It's just a programming language, so it's as amenable to optimization as all programming languages are. And there's really no limit. That's the kind of thing that software people that we're quite good at, really, because it's the problem then is how do we maintain precisely the same semantics and yet improve performance? And in some ways that's the easiest and in some ways most fun kind of programming job to work on, because it's so distinct from the kind of exploration where here I think the much bigger challenge than making it fast is to make it sufficiently expressive and obvious and so on. Not that I think we've achieved that yet, but I think we're starting to see what the necessary primitives are and how they fit together. And this point about there not being a syntax for wikified attributes, I've made a few times. We've discussed a few times as being just one of those known limitations that I guess I'm not worrying about too much at the moment because I feel I want to learn more about the underlying use cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that, but part of the fun part about it is being able to reuse the import variables widget, of course, and my obsession is to try to, every time we introduce a new mechanism, is to try and fold it over and reuse it as much as possible. And yeah, so it's quite nice that import variables does look like the right solution.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so well, that was the last thing I had. we've lost Stephan. Nathan is offering a bounty of $20 for whoever builds the first macro variable import transclusion Turing machine. Yes, exactly. Well, it's a recurring interest. Stephan has pointed out in the past how we could be handling filter processing differently, and making filter processing be part of the same state machine that we use to process the widget tree. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else in chat. So guys, any other questions or topics from you guys?
No, not.
I just wanted to quickly say that the editor mappings control panel is awesome.
Oh, thank you. That's very cool. Let's just show it so that people watching know what we were talking about. So Nathan's talking about this, where it's an interesting thing. This is quite a what's the word? It's quite a detailed bit of configuration. It's saying for each content type, what type of editor should we use? And if we go to the CodeMirror demo, you'll see that same part of control panel says something slightly different. So now, in the case of CodeMirror, we've got a whole load of content, well, a whole load of additional content types that point to CodeMirror, but also some of the content types, such as TextVND TiddlyWiki, that points to text in the normal version, with the CodeMirror loaded, points to CodeMirror. So I think there's two things going on here. One is exploring ways that we can represent configuration information in tiddlers in a way that is convenient for plugins. So the idea here is we're using a technique that's used quite often now, which the idea of a special prefix followed by the key, if you like, for this little sub-database. So we're basically making all tiddlers that start with that prefix be a little kind of mini specialist database, and in order to add records to it, you just create a tiddler with that prefix. In order to delete a record or change it, obviously you just overwrite it. But the thing that's kind of I quite like is we could have made this user interface here much more interactive, and indeed may well do so in the future. So the obvious thing is this could be a drop down so that we can dynamically choose it, and then it would automatically change the value of the underlying tiddler. But I think the thing that's quite nice is how just by making these things be links to tiddlers, we've got a UI, which is to reuse the normal interface for editing tiddlers. It may not be the best UI, but it means that at least we start with something. And of course, by the time you've clicked on one of these, it invites you to understand the way that this configuration information was put together. So, I mean, not everybody is going to make the connection, but you click on text/CSS and you end up with a tiddler here. I think many of the kind of curious experimental people that seem to be attracted to TiddlyWiki would have no trouble making that association and then immediately understand how to, I don't know, create a multid file that changes loads of these things at once.
And you can also have some description or something like this. So
yes, in another field.
Yeah, so that you could expand your table with a little bit more of text, which actually describes what's going on.
Yeah.
So this is quite nice. Yeah.
But I think a lot of the time, hopefully, people would buy the CodeMirror plugin. Let me just go and show you the source of the CodeMirror plugin these days. It now includes. Oh, sorry. Plugins, CodeMirror. So we've got a multids file, in fact, that provides all those CodeMirror mappings. That's now built into the CodeMirror plugin. So if if we go and look at the CodeMirror plugin open the info panel, look at advanced. There we see a list of all of the actual tiddlers inside the plugin, and so that one multids file has, as you would expect, generated 8 different individual tiddlers that are included as shadow tiddlers. So thank you, Nathan. I've given a rather long explanation for your comment, but hopefully that was helpful. Gosh, this is extremely. One forgets how extremely long the CodeMirror plugin is. It's a 16-foot web page. Sorry.
Have you seen the Web-IDE introduction from Mozilla? So they're also using a CodeMirror for their Web-IDE in the nightly build of the Firefox.
Okay, well, I've got the nightly build of Firefox. How do we start it off?
No, I just wanted to mention it, so it will be quite interesting. I had a short view, but didn't test it. So they included the IDE for Firefox OS into the browser. It's yeah, a little bit of fun.
So hang on, what did I say? Web developer app manager. Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad they're making this easy. I mean, if it's not obvious, I would really like to make TiddlyWiki into a Firefox OS app. And every so often I look at it and wonder what's involved. But
yeah, but I think the mechanism is a little bit different. But yeah, it should work. So if you have the right manifest and all this stuff, so yeah, it will be. I think it will be quite a big application.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to start installing things now, but and I want to get one of the phones as well. They're really cheap, and I'd like to support the project. Okay, so next from anybody, let's go back here. I think basically a lot of the 5.13 stuff we've already covered because it's taken such a long time and we've had so many Hangouts since it's been under development.
Tell me, I think the roadmap would be interesting. I think because I think there is only two things left, which would lead to a one in the leading numbers.
Go on. So which things are you thinking?
Yeah, the plugin library and the update handling.
Yeah. Oh, by update handling you mean upgrading this stuff?
Upgrading TiddlyWiki.
And I think maybe that as well. I mean, although that's really it's TiddlyFox and TiddlyDesktop where I'm intending to do it. But yeah, and I think you're right. The TiddlyWiki file format, we're always going to have to be backwards compatible with the current one. It's fine. We can change that in 5.1. This thing it came up in the group this week. Actually, it is definitely on my list. But I think it's what can I say? That the present arrangements, I think we can live with the present arrangements, and the goal here is to try and minimize the amount of stuff that we do while we're in beta. But I think
I also think it's very similar to the mechanism you described with the commands. So where you want to have objects, I think productivity features is for one, or afterwards if one is released.
Yeah, none of that. I mean, they're all still things that I would like to do. And you may remember back on my notes here, notes about 5.14. The last thing I was discussing was how I wanted to do the parser refactoring. I'm increasingly thinking that, embarrassing though it is, that I should try and leave that until after the beta as well. And just simply because it's quite a big lump of work. Plus, if it's successful, it won't have any material changes on end users apart from additional features. So again, it doesn't seem like the kind of breaking change we should worry about. The thing that gone.
What about the GitHub flavored Markdown
exactly.
line break? But I think this one should be in beta.
That's the worrying one, and the worry about it is that it's very hard. I mean, I do actually have an unpublished fork of my work on the GitHub flavored Markdown stuff. It's very hard to do without the refactoring.
Okay, yeah, and as I think last time we discussed it, it has some problems with the HTML.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't really have a good specification, so to speak, for it yet. So I think, yeah. I mean, as I say, I think the game now has got to be to come out of beta, maybe. Well, there's an opportunity to do that in September, which will be TiddlyWiki's 10th anniversary. But I think it might be more appropriate to try and do it in July.
Tell me just an idea. We have the multi-line syntax, and the multi-line syntax has the problem at the moment that it doesn't, let's say, do wikification, so it's just plain text.
Yes.
Would it be possible to introduce, let's say, wikification, but use single line breaks as a BR element or something like this?
That is basically doing GitHub flavored Markdown. They're doing GitHub flavored Markdown line breaks.
No, but I think with the special handling, so we have the triple double quotes, which introduces, let's say, the plain.
Yes, no, I know the syntax you mean, but and the contents of that at the moment isn't wikified, but the.
I was thinking about removing the HTML stuff from this element, so that it's just using bold and italics and this stuff.
Right, and again, that takes us into the zone of wanting to refactor the parser, because one of the goals is you know this vocabulary handling. What that actually is it's basically the initial state of the parser. So the parser is a finite state machine, with a different state for each place it can be in the parse tree. And so, yeah, I mean, it would be great to do it, but I have a horrible feeling that a more useful thing to do might be to pay more attention to the Markdown support that we do have. So somebody else pointed out that the Markdown parser that we're using at the moment is a strict Markdown parser, and it doesn't do GitHub flavored Markdown line breaks. But it would be reasonable to upgrade to a Markdown parser that did. And then, we've now got image support in Markdown, and we've got link support in Markdown. So we're looking not bad for the idea that for users who wish to use TiddlyWiki primarily with text and with links and images, but less of the sort of application building stuff, why not just write those tiddlers in Markdown? And certainly when I think of, when I introduce TiddlyWiki to certain people, I present it as this is a Markdown wiki. It uses its own wiki text format for building the UI, but you write in Markdown. And that's a nice, simple way of positioning it, I think, that makes sense for most people.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think this would be a better approach. Yeah, you're definitely right.
But then, well, I don't know. If we can resolve the HTML issue, then I'd be back up for it. Anyway, we've just managed to persuade ourselves that there's less work than expected, so that's good.
I think it makes sense because, if you have a, let's say, a mechanism that is defined and easy and straightforward, I think it makes more sense than a complicated hack.
Exactly. So it is good news. I'm very, it'll make a massive difference to be out of beta, I think. And then we need to start thinking about things like having a maintenance branch and a feature branch and all that kind of thing. which will make life more exciting for everybody. And in fact, I must do some more. There's still some more ARIA stuff. The situation. Let me update my thing. The situation edit template is still pretty poor. So we've got to take out of 5.3 tank mime type and that. And then we're suggesting that those things be left. Right. I'm so sorry. I must just dash off for 1 second. I'm going to leave you in each other's company for a second. I'll be back in about 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
So Mario, are you still working with cloud hosting options and Vagrant and all of that?
Yeah, not Vagrant anymore.
No? I'm somehow not that surprised.
No, but, Vagrant is nice, but the problem is that it's not exactly what I wanted, because there you have the let's say the organization, or you have to learn new language again to set up all the stuff. I think I'll go with Docker. There still you have your own language, and at the moment I have a setup for Windows with Hyper-V to test Docker with the Atomic operating system. It looks quite interesting.
Yeah, Vagrant has always sort of felt a little heavy-handed in some ways, and even Docker really is a little heavy for
the problem is if we want to make things simple, then it should work with every computer, and if you have if it should work with every computer, you have to use a 32-bit operating system. So, for example, with my old laptop, and if I start VirtualBox, it can handle virtualization, but it can't handle a 64-bit operating system as a guest. And so, as I did set up the first Vagrant setting, everything worked, but it didn't start. And then I said, okay, I need to use a 32-bit operating system, and so that you make it universal. But that's actually not what, let's say, modern hardware is. So, this is really complicated. So that if you want to make it simple, I think then the approach that Jeremy did with a single HTML file that's just that is very easy and very cool to handle. If you want to have a server side, then you need to deal with all the problems that are involved, and most of it is also security related. So you can create some simple setups, and this is also a problem from Vagrant. They have the unsecure key, and everywhere they write you should immediately remove it, but then there is a lot of problems because people don't remove the unsecure key.
Yes. Yeah.
so everyone has access. So if you know the key, and then you have SSH access to, let's say, simple settings, then that's a problem. So yeah.
Indeed, I'm just I remain kind of scared of servers, really, and the frightful consequences of things going wrong. And my work in TiddlyWiki, it started off as me trying to avoid taking responsibility for a server.
And yeah, yes. I think the way that the OpenShift people do it at the moment is quite nice, and they have a very attractive price structure, even for private users. And if they really start to open up with the new setting, with the Atomic and the Docker as a building block, I think you can make it that everything is automatically set up and still secure for let's say normal users, and this would be very interesting.
Yes, I also saw Google Cloud Engine just added Docker support recently as well.
I think at the moment everyone jumps on it, so they have really big support at the moment.
It'll be interesting to see if these virtualized boxed environment deployment tools sort of continue in this sort of flavor of the week mode that they seem to have done for the past year or two.
Yeah, and I think the big strength they have is that they are able to get people to the table and discuss about standards, and they really set the standard. So they always start with something that already works, that is really simple to use, so everyone wants to use it, and then it's a de facto standard, and then let's talk about the real standard. And then the big players, I think, come to the table and they really talk about it. And I think the biggest strength of them is that they can talk. Yeah, it's really fun, and I think there is some great potential.
Yes, I'm so pleased that to have both of you, particularly in the group, with evidently much more bandwidth to take on board this stuff than I have been able to do. But I've been thrilled. I don't know if you've seen recently, there's been quite a steady trickle of reports from people who've tried to use TiddlyWiki on AN other cloud service provider and have mostly had a good experience. I think. I mean, mostly it seems to have worked.
If you cover it behind a proxy, then I think you're fine. So if you have Nginx in front of it, then I think it could even work at the very beginning. But then you have the problem with all the lazy loading stuff that the adapter at the moment is not very stable at the moment. Yes, it's stable, but it doesn't handle all the things that it should.
Okay, go on. And what sort of things do you mean?
Yeah, I think it's I still with TiddlyWeb and the recipe and back structure. And TiddlyWiki at the moment, the adapter at the moment is for a single bag.
Yeah. No, that's still a question how much of that we're going to try and fix versus how much we'll just do a tank backend for it, basically.
Even with its rough edges in that regard, I still always found TiddlyWiki to be one of the easiest sort of cloud apps in terms of deployment, which is ironic considering that no real thought was given to that. It sort of happened as a happy accident. But I found a wide range of scenarios where it's very easy to get things up and going, and that's phenomenal.
I think because I think this is because that people still can handle files very well. So if you have a single tiddler is one file, then you can do all crazy stuff, and I think this works very well.
To your point, Nathan, about TiddlyWiki being easy to handle in a server context, one of the things that did strike me quite early on with TiddlyWiki is at first I thought the cool thing about TiddlyWiki was that there was no server, but then I realized that actually the double cool thing what that actually means is that you can have any server, and that's a completely different kettle of fish. I mean, not running without a server is a cool thing, but having a single application that can run across multiple server architectures, although conceptually simple, it doesn't happen very often. And that's not normally how we break the layers in web application building.
And to have it happen almost sort of as a side effect is just so cool.
Yes, exactly. And as a consequence of my own sort of shortcomings almost, because in a parallel universe somewhere, I would have, by the time of TiddlyWiki, been adept at Linux, and none of this would have happened. I'd have written some PHP backend, and
it would have been terrible.
Jeremy, Danielo joined.
MediaWiki Mark II or something. Danielo, got you. Great to have you here. Oh, you got your microphone? Would you like to say hi?
Hello.
Good to see you. Glad you could make it. I'm afraid, actually, I am planning to go a little earlier than normal today. So I'm planning to stop and 10 or 15 minutes, I'm afraid, today, so I've got 2 hours off somewhere. But very pleased you can make it, Danielo. How have you been getting on? Have you got any questions for us?
Nothing. Just to congratulate you, Jeremy, because I really love the new version of the wiki. I just look at the release notes, and I think you found the button in this one. I think there are a lot of things very expected from many people.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's great to hear.
The thing that I have, it's not a problem at all. I can live with that. Okay, you restore the ESC key to cancel editions.
Oh, yes.
And that's a problem if you're using B as a K-map for CodeMirror editor, because you switch between insert mode and command mode with the ESC key.
Okay.
But I can live with that, really.
Yeah, no, but we do need to make all those keyboard shortcuts configurable. So the plan, you'll remember how. Let me. I do a search in all my. So the keyboard widget happens here, where we've got key equals escape, key equals control enter. What it should actually say is key equals key mappings cancel tiddler, where the value of that tiddler would be ESC. So, so if you may want to send that through as a patch. It's just adding. We need to add those 2 shadow tiddlers, and maybe a more consistent name for them. Wouldn't be that. It would be through the.
One question, Jeremy. I saw that now your TiddlyWiki supports external image in every version, I guess. So in a standalone HTML and there are plans to support external tiddlers also in Node.
Sort of. I mean, at the moment, if you can set an I know this isn't what you mean, but I think I showed last week the support for HTML tiddlers, and HTML tiddlers can be external. So let me show you what I mean. If I create a tiddler, text HTML, give it the field canonical URI, and give that the address Google. Oops, that's probably a porn site or something. There we go. .com. Now, when we view that tiddler, it should have created an iframe with google.com in it. Okay. But security gets in the way in the case of Google. Google doesn't like being in an iframe in that way because it's an HTTPS page. But I guess if I changed it to TiddlyWiki, classic.tiddlywiki.com, that would be the one to do. Then, yeah. So this same mechanism of having a canonical URI would enable us, in some situations, to update the lazy loading handling so that if there's a tiddler that has a canonical URI, that we go off and retrieve its content from that URI. And there are obviously lots of same origin pitfalls that mean it's not quite as flexible an arrangement as we'd like. But yes, it's something I'd absolutely like to support. And it, even for things like TiddlyWiki itself, it would mean that I could put all the developer docs into separate files and just pull them in on as required.
The problem there that you have is that then the stuff is not searchable anymore. and so you have to think about all tricks to get the real, let's say, a better search.
But that's a trade-off that sort of reflects the trade-offs of the platform, really. I mean, that's rather the thing about the web, isn't it?
Yeah. I think for tiddlywiki.com it would be nice so that the developer stuff is lazy loaded, so that the standard users don't need to see it, and they have a shorter load time. And then there may be a second one which is built, which contains all the stuff, so that you have the search back.
And you can take it offline without difficulty.
And it wouldn't be any problem, because you just do a new build and you're fine.
Yeah. I think a lot of this stuff is flexibility that we need to make available, but probably not expose a lot of it by default, because it does provide a lot of opportunities for confusion and foot shooting. Nathan, sorry, I spoke over the top of you. Sorry, Nathan, didn't I interrupt you?
I think it was Danielo.
Oh, Danielo.
The only thing missing is saving to external tiddler files, like in Node.js.
Yes. Do you know, funnily enough, that came up because the guy Simon, who's been helping me with the accessibility stuff, he was asking, how do I install a new language into my TiddlyWiki? And so I said, go to tiddlywiki.com, go to the plugins tab, find the language that you want, and then drag it over to your wiki. And he pointed out what I think we might have guessed, that screen readers do not have good support for drag and drop. So the best alternative I can think of is for the tiddler itself. Oh, that was a bad example. But so is the plugin tiddler to have here in the info pane or somewhere a download button that would download a .tid file of that plugin, and then on the import side, of course, a screen reader user can use the browse button very easily to then get to the file.
Oh yeah, that's nice. And what about that as the default for saving each one?
Well, this would be saving an individual tiddler. This would be saving just this one plugin. But yeah, and I think it's there's a few options like that. It would be useful to have a button to give me the static HTML, or well, not this particular plugin tiddler, but it'd be useful to be able to go to hello there and then say save HTML. Sorry, I slid out of the way, but click a button that says save HTML that would save an HTML version of that tiddler. And the attractive thing about that is then you could make a sort of mega tiddler that did lots of transcluding, so that saving it was actually saving your entire thesis. So it ends up being the solution to that problem, the kind of tiddly docs problem of composing a narrative from lots of small tiddlers. Okay, so let me come off of screen sharing so that I can say hello properly. Any other questions or comments, Danielo, for instance?
Oh, I think I want to play around a little bit more with the new version before asking.
Well, hopefully we'll see you at the Hangout next week, the last one in June. There has been a couple of bugs I haven't had a chance to actually in 5.13. That means I think we might well do a 5.14 in the next few days, and then it would be 5.15 at some point in early July, and then from what we were saying earlier, maybe the release version towards the end of July.
Jeremy, today is the last Hangout in June. Next week will be the first.
Oh, there you go. I'm unreliable on so many topics, including basic calendaring. Yes, of course. The problem is that I don't know how many days June has, which for a long time I thought that was one of the things that changed year to year, just because that was the obvious explanation for my continued confusion.
Nope, I think you're just confused.
Yes. Right, so sorry to slip off early, but once again, I'd like to close by thanking you very much for coming along, and of course Stephan, who's left us now, had to go. Really appreciate your time, and all of you on the call. You know that you make a tremendous contribution to TiddlyWiki. 5.13 carries everybody's fingerprints on it, and for that, yes, we should be proud. And so, thank you very much for giving up your time today. I thought I was visible, but my camera's gone off. But I'll look forward to seeing you. Oh, I'm visible to you, just not to me. Never mind. I'll look forward to seeing you next week, guys. Many thanks. So, as usual, we'll wave goodbye, and then I'll click the stop broadcast button. So, cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.